I wanted to make a nice, big picture video to round out the year instead of focusing on a specific game. So I thought a fun way to do that would be to make my own list of the 7 deadly sins of game design. This isn't a hard set list, nor is this anything official. It's just a list of things I believe can be truly detrimental to a game if they suffer from it. And because I don't like focusing on negativity, every entry is going to have a good example of how to do it right. So first off, nothing ruins a game quite like a bad control setup. Whether it's lag, unresponsive button presses, a bad controller layout, or just general wonkiness, it's important that a game feels good to play. After all, the design of the levels, enemies, and mechanics don't matter if you can't interact with them, and the controller is the player's gateway into that. A good controller setup example would have to be the original Super Mario Bros. On NES. Mario's jumps are tight, it's easy to move Mario, and it's easy to understand. Next up, we have game mechanics that overwhelm the player. Games are allowed to be complicated and dense, but a game should never start at 100%. Tutorials and campaigns should slowly build the player's game knowledge brick by brick, so that they can start to master the game instead of being mentally overwhelmed at the forefront. Pure information overload is a good way to turn off potential players. Most games, especially modern video games, do this well, but for a concrete example, Wonderful 101 is a good one. Each hero has a unique weapon with different properties, but you start with only Wonder Red, and slowly acquire the others one by one, so that by the time you've mastered one, you've moved on to the next. Enemies that are weak to the new weapon are often introduced too to reinforce that concept. So by the end of the game, you can put any enemy in your path, and you should know how to handle it due to the slow buildup of knowledge. Going hand in hand with the previous sin, a game should never stagnate in design. Playing the same level or fighting the same enemies rapidly turns players off, so adding variety to spice up the gameplay is important. Whether it's new enemies, tools, environments, or mechanics, anything that can shake up the formula is good. A solid example is DMC5, which I know I talk about way too much in these videos, but it's still a good example. New moves and tools are added nearly every level to keep the player's moveset interesting. Add in new enemies and map layouts, and it's an engaging adventure until the end. Winning a game feels good. Losing a game feels bad. Hot take, I know. But what I want to focus on is fail states that are out of your control or too tough. Leading an AI companion is fine, but when they do something against your wishes and sets you back with a game over state, that is frustrating. Instant fail states can also fall into this category, like stealth sections or tailing missions that cause instant failures. These kinds of fail states are the fast lane to a player's anger and need to be avoided. Done right, Resident Evil 4 and The Last of Us both handle their AI and stealth sections well. Both make it easy to control your partner, or at least have them avoid detection, while stealth is never an instant death, and allowing you to fight back. I'm a speed reader. Heck, sometimes I don't even read what's in front of me, which is why sin number 5 is here. Players are forgetful and have lives outside of gaming. And one thing to make me put down a game like an RPG is playing for a few hours, not playing for 2 weeks, and coming back having forgotten what my goal is. It doesn't need to be a complete summary. Just guide the player in the right direction, or have a little reminder of their mission. A good example of this is Mega Man Battle Network, a series I'd love to talk more about someday, but unfortunately that day isn't today. This game's control setup has the L button has either Mega Man or LAN give a quick little blurb, sometimes cryptic, sometimes explicitly, stating their next objective. It's a good reminder for players to know what to do, without giving them a line painted on the floor telling them where to go. Keeping in line with the theme of reading, the next sin is having too much text in menus. Never-ending dialogue in menus and games can be frustrating for players like me that just want to play the game. Some games like visual novels are primarily just text, and that's fine. I'm mainly talking about games that have some sort of player agency outside of game dialogue. Having too much text on screen at once, or having too much text repeatedly, is a huge negative for most gamers. A way to do this right is Persona 5. Despite being a super long JRPG with tons of story and dialogue, the UI never overwhelms a player. Sure, the fancy graphics make staring at it more bearable, but just the amount of text and use of highlighting important words is a good practice for any game to use. Finally, we have glitches. How can a game even be played if it crashes every time you open it, or glitches make it unplayable? Sin number 7 is just that, having the game be literally unplayable. This should be obvious, but no game that wants players to play them should suffer from this. Games will inevitably have crashes and bugs, but when it frequently occurs and affects large portions of the game, that is a problem. I'm not going to list an example for this one, but most games out there that are released manage this pretty well, and those that don't are rather infamous. So how is the list of sins? Any that you thought of that should be on here? Let me know in the comments below. I'm going to be taking a bit of a break for holidays, so until next year, Godspeed.